Ecosystem services, or the benefits that humans derive from nature, is not only an important scientific concept, but it's also an important concept for businesses. And corporations that recognize this and are integrating ecosystem services considerations into their decision-making are realizing true benefits in the marketplace. The Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, which came out in 2005, was a 4-year study of the state of the world's ecosystems and the services that they provide. It involved about 1,400 scientists, and what they concluded was something very disturbing. And that is that about 60% of the world's ecosystem services are either destroyed or degraded. And this has a true material impact on businesses, whether they realize it or not. And that's because they both depend upon these ecosystem services as inputs to their business and also impact these ecosystem services. For example, some of the provisioning ecosystem services, like crops, water, fish, and wood, are key inputs to business, as well as products that some businesses actually produce. So the regulating ecosystem services like pollination are critical to the production of crops, or even some of the natural disaster regulating services are critical to the insurance industry. So coastal islands or coastal wetlands can help to mitigate storms as they come on shore. And finally, there are cultural ecosystem services. Natural areas and parks and wildlands have intrinsic value to humans, but they're also key for the survival of ecotourism and tourism industry globally. However, despite the dependencies and impacts and these linkages, most companies, most environmental management systems aren't doing enough. Number one, they aren't considering the dependencies in a systematic way that companies have on ecosystem services, and they're only considering some of the ecosystem services that companies impact. As a result, companies may be exposed to risks they're not aware of, or there may be opportunities out there that they're not taking advantage of. And because of that, the World Resources Institute, in cooperation with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and the Meridian Institute, developed the Corporate Ecosystem Services Review, or ESR for short. And the ESR helps companies to understand those dependencies and impacts they have on ecosystem services, and to develop strategies to take advantage of some of the opportunities and also reduce their risks that they're exposed to. For example, Energia Global International is a Costa Rican-based hydroelectric power plant. It's now part of the ENL group of Italy. And they were literally losing power to the loss of the ecosystem service of erosion regulation. Farmers upstream from the dam were actually cutting down trees, which was causing erosion, and siltation was building up behind the dam. And that was actually causing a loss of power. And the solution to that was to think about the ecosystem service of erosion regulation and actually pay farmers to maintain trees and the services those trees provide in holding back soil. Chevron is another company that's taken advantage of some of the new markets in ecosystem services that are emerging in the U.S. and around the world. The United States law, the Clean Water Act, requires that companies that destroy wetlands actually have to restore a wetland in the same watershed of similar value, or that provide similar services like water filtration. After they tapped out about 3,000 hectares of land that they had, tapped it out of natural gas and oil, they actually restored the wetland and established a wetland bank, and they're now selling the credits from that bank to other developers in the area. They're expected to make about $150 million from this operation. In addition, ecosystem services are beginning to weave their way into the regulatory and legal framework of the business environment. Union Pacific, for example, was fined $102 million in the U.S. Union Pacific is a railroad company based in the U.S., and they had some land out west that they weren't managing very well. That poor management helped cause a forest fire. And the lawsuit included not just the loss of timber from the surrounding areas, but also the loss of views and other ecosystem services. And this case has affected numerous cases in the U.S., and we're seeing similar developments around the world where ecosystem services are becoming an additional part of the regulatory framework. We're seeing an increase in the use of the Ecosystem Services Review and ecosystem service-based thinking around the world, and that's because companies are increasingly realizing the importance of ecosystem services, the risk and opportunities it presents, and realizing that with the degradation of these ecosystem services, that responding to and integrating these things into their decision making is increasingly valuable.